not even see the full extent of what God was doing behind the scenes until we are in his presence and he reveals that to us. And I guess that's where the whole faith aspect comes into play with it.
Today we're talking about how to find hope and healing after tragedy. Jessica Ronne is an author, teacher, wife, nonprofit director, special needs advocate, and mom of 8. Her book, Sunlight Burning at Midnight, documents her journey of unrelenting heartbreaks, from when her baby was diagnosed with a life-changing disability through the loss of her young husband to a brain tumor. Within the span of 6 years of marriage, Jessica became a widow, left alone to care for their 4 young children, including one with special needs. She regularly writes about faith, grief, food, simplicity, blended families, gardening, special needs, and everything else. So welcome, Jessica. So glad to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I know, and you've got an awesome story, very encouraging, and that's why it's like when I read about you, and I was like, oh, I've got to have her on the show because this is like totally awesome. When people say mom of 8, obviously they're thinking, oh my gosh, girl, how many pregnancies did you go to? But that's not your story, right? Yours is a really romantic, I think a really sweet story of how God brought two people who were, going through similar situations together and created something awesome. So, and you're going to share with our audience today, like if you've ever felt, and you're listening today, you've been through grief or you've lost it, you've had devastation, and you have a child with special needs, and you have those days where you're like, Lord, what do I do with myself? Jessica's got some great tips she's going to offer us today. But before we get into the juicy bits, let's rewind a bit and you tell us your story and how you kind of got to doing what you're doing today.
Okay, well, my story begins in 2004. I was pregnant with our second child, and I went to what I thought was a routine ultrasound appointment. And it was there that I discovered that this child had severe hydrocephalus, and I was told by the specialist to consider abortion because this child, in their opinion, would never make it to birth. And my faith didn't allow for that to be an option. So my husband, Jason, and I decided to carry this child as long as the Lord would sustain him or her. And we had a scheduled C-section on August 12, 2004. And this baby was lifted from my belly and gave a hearty cry for life. And he was whisked off to neonatal, and 2 weeks later, we were given our son, Lucas, and told basically, good luck. So this child who we were told from the beginning would never survive, and if he or she did survive, the birth would die in our arms, and then, walking out of the hospital 2 weeks after he was born and headed home with him. And that kind of changed our life forever. And during that whole process, I journaled and continued to journal even after I brought him home because he did have profound special needs, and it was really difficult to care for him. But we settled into our new normal and found out we were pregnant again a couple of years later and had a baby girl. And after her birth, Jason began having a lot of health problems. Losing weight and vision problems and disorientation. And he just continued to go to specialist after specialist after specialist. And they just said, you have type 1 diabetes, which was so odd because he was a personal trainer, he was a tennis professional, and he owned his own fitness club. So no history, just out of the blue, you have type 1 diabetes and you have to get it under control. So one night I said to Jason, I need a quick run across town to my dad's house. Are you okay to watch 3 kids by yourself? Because he had been having blood sugar issues, and it was just kind of getting to that point where we weren't sure what he was capable of. And he said, yeah, I'm good. I'm feeling good. So go ahead and go. So I left. And as I was pulling into my dad's driveway, my phone rang. I picked it up and he said, Jess, call 911. And the phone went dead. And so I frantically called 911, rushed home, came home to find him sprawled out on a stretcher. He had had a seizure and seized until he passed out, and had enough sense of mind to put all the kids in a safe place. Like Lucas and my oldest Caleb were watching a video. Baby Mabel was in her exerciser, and then he passed out. So I walked into, ambulance and firemen, and they're rushing him off to the hospital, and I'm frantic. So I frantically go to the hospital with him. And we're sitting there, and his health problems had been occurring for like 9 or 12 months at this point, and the only answer they had was diabetes. I'm sitting there, and the doctor comes up to me and says, well, we're going to do an MRI to rule out the possibility of a brain tumor. And it all just clicked, and I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that that's what it was. And he did. He had a brain tumor. They did immediate surgery the next morning, and it was a baseball-sized brain tumor that they took out. And it was only a grade 2 at that point, so it wasn't terminal at that point. And they gave us the option to watch and wait. They didn't suggest chemo or radiation at that point, and so we took that option just to watch and wait with quarterly MRIs. And he was a new man from that point on, just had a new lease on life. And in that process, we got pregnant again. And let me think, I always get these dates mixed up. I was about 5 or 6 months pregnant, and he went in for his quarterly MRI appointment. And he called me from the hospital and said, Jess, very annoyed, the tumor's back. The doctor told me I have to check myself into the hospital immediately. So I'm about 6 months pregnant at this point, 3 small children, and my husband has another brain tumor. So it began the frantic search of finding people to watch the kids. I went to the hospital. He had another emergency surgery. They took out another baseball-sized tumor. And now we had to wait for the biopsy results. And they came back the following day, and Jason's mom and I were sitting there, and the doctor walked in, and he said, I'm so sorry, but it's a glioblastoma. And at this point, I knew that that meant a life expectancy of about 14 months. So from that point on, chemo and radiation became our new normal. He did radiation for 6 or 8 weeks, and then began the typical protocol of chemotherapy. And one by one, the chemos stopped working. So they would just try something new and try something new and try something new until nothing worked anymore. And the doctor said to me, it's up to you how we proceed. We can either continue to try something new or we can stop. And I made the difficult decision to stop treatments at that point because at that point I didn't feel like it was doing him any good anymore. And
was he incapacitated at that stage? Did they have him like sedated?
No, he was at home during all of this. He told me that he wanted to be home. And honestly, he worked up until about 2 weeks before he passed away. He was so stubborn. He was still personal training a couple of times a week. And his employer called me up one night and said, Jess, we can't do this anymore. He can't even walk around the room anymore, let alone, train people. But she was really sweet about it and continued to let him do that. And so we had hospice come into our life about 2 weeks before he passed away. And then he passed away on August 24, 2010.
Wow.
So
that's going to rock your world, right? 4 kids. I mean, how old was your youngest by that stage?
Oh, sure. Joshua was 11 months old. He turned 1 a month after his dad died. So I had a 6-year-old. Lucas, my special needs son, was 5. Mabel was 3. And then Joshua was 11 months old. So yeah, I'm now a widow with 4 young children. And, part of it, there was extreme sadness in it all, having lost my husband, but there was also kind of a sense of relief having had gone through cancer for 3 years with 4 small children. And now having at least cancer off my back. Cancer can be an extremely cruel taskmaster, and having the kids live through that, and
also you're just keeping yourself like and I feel for you because my mother-in-law also passed away from cancer about 2 years ago, and I had to work through those emotions, and you could definitely talk about this, but of almost feeling angry at the doctors, like, why didn't you diagnose this earlier? Like, she had a brain tumor as well, and they thought it was nerves, and then she ended up having radiation in her spine, and in the last year of her life, she was confined to a wheelchair before she passed because of misdiagnosis and treatment. So how are you feeling about that? What was your faith like at this stage? I mean, besides the fact you're just in what I call warrior mode, you're just doing, right? What were you thinking at that stage?
With the first tumor, we were so gung-ho and just, our faith was so strong and we were going to get through this. And we just had faith that we wouldn't have to deal with it again for like 20 years because that's what the doctor said. These tumors usually come back, but sometimes they don't come back for 20, 25 years. And we thought, our God has put us through enough. He's tested us with Luke and he's tested us with his brain tumor. And now his glory is going to show through the story. It's just, we're going to rock on. And then when the tumor came back, like a year and a half later, it was a terminal diagnosis at that point with a glioblastoma. It was like, what in the world is going on here? And honestly, our faith was strong even up until the very end of that. And I would say my heart started to be prepared for what was truly coming in June of that summer before he passed away. But I don't think Jason even accepted that he was dying until a week or two before he died. He just thought God's just going to wait to show off and there's going to be this big miracle and it'll be awesome and the world will be amazed. And then he passed away. And, that I would say that final year, I had so much anger. I look back now and I realize that anger was my go-to emotion. Anger kept me moving forward. Whereas if you're just curled up in a ball crying in the corner every day, it's really hard to take care of children and a dying husband. But anger kind of propels you. Not that that's a good emotion, but it did. It kind of propelled me in those moments. And, I worked through all those stages of grief too in that final year. And even I think during the 3-year diagnosis, just working through acceptance and denial and all of that stuff that you work through, where by the time he passed away, it was me on my knees, just saying, "Thy will be done. You are God and I am not." And that's a lesson that he continuously has to teach me. I am God and you are not.
And that's a hard thing. I mean, especially I think for us, believers, is that we almost feel like because we have God on our side that we shouldn't be allowed or we shouldn't be feeling these things. But I think it's important that we acknowledge the fact that we have grief, we have these emotions, and yes, just like a normal human being, you're going to feel the anger. I mean, she was in South Africa with my mom-in-law, so I didn't get to actually see her towards the end, but just being on the other side of the continent, still like that wrestling with God, like you have these promises, God, you're going to bring it away, you're going to heal the situation, but knowing that it's okay, right? It's okay to go through those things. I mean, what would you say for someone who's feeling that right now?
Yeah, I think if I'm understanding the question correctly, I think leading up to that even, and with my whole journey with Lucas, I was such a strong believer in speak it and believe it. That verse, he who says to this mountain shall be removed and cast into the sea. So it was, if my faith is strong enough, I can get what I want out of this. And so if I can muster up enough faith, my child will be healed. And if I can muster up enough faith, my husband will be healed. And I think what I've learned through this whole process is that's not how God works. God's ways are so much higher than our ways. And my life today is completely healed, but not in the way that I would have ever imagined it. And Lucas, my son, is completely healed in God's eyes, but not in the way that Jessica wanted it. So it was understanding, learning to trust that his ways are higher than my ways and to set aside my desires and my will. And like I said, it's still a battle at times. Life isn't, constantly easy today with 8 kids and a special needs child living in the middle of nowhere. And, 8 kids, we have 7 grieving children. So into that a little bit. But.
Tell us a little bit about that, because that's what I find God is in his awesomeness always brings beauty from ashes. And you have a wonderful, almost a Hallmark story where you got to tell us a little bit about how you found that God redeemed your story with your new husband.
Well, okay, so Jason passed away August 24, and like I said, there was kind of this peaceful ache almost afterwards. Like it was nice to be able to spend time with my kids again. I really missed them, having had poured so much energy into Jason for so long. So the kids and I were doing okay, and I decided to get them all dressed up for Halloween that night and go out trick-or-treating. And just, take all the pictures and post them on Facebook, show the world that I was doing fine and, functioning and getting out. And So I brought him out trick-or-treating, and we came home and I put him to bed, and I checked my blog because I had been writing on a Care Pages blog through this whole process. And there was a woman in Pennsylvania who followed my blog. And she just left a little comment that night saying, I have no idea why I'm even asking you to do this, but I feel like God is telling me to tell you to check out this guy's blog. He's a widower, and he lost his wife to brain cancer 4 days after Jason died. He lives in Oklahoma, and he has 3 young children. At the time, I was living in Michigan. So I checked out his blog and just left a little comment saying, hey, if you ever want somebody to talk to, we've been in similar circumstances, and I'd be happy to be an ear if you want to talk. And he responded the next day, which led to phone calls and an eventual meeting that December. We met for the first time in Savannah, Georgia, just the 2 of us, because we didn't want to get the kids involved if it wasn't going to go anywhere. And it was love at first sight.
Oh,
and,
sweet.
We talked about getting married there even, and just said, that wouldn't be fair to the families and the kids and everything. So we continued to date for a little bit, and we were married pretty quickly. The next year, April 2011, he moved to Michigan with his 3 young children, and we adopted each other's kids. And then a couple years later, he said, I'm not going to stay in Michigan. It's too cold. So where should we move? And we started talking about what our dream life would look like. And it was just simple. We wanted our family and our faith, and we wanted to raise chickens and garden and kind of live in the middle of nowhere. And so we moved to rural Tennessee with our crew. And then in 2015, we decided that 7 children wasn't enough. So we had a baby together.
Oh, that is so awesome. So you truly do have one of those, those relationship stories, which, you could definitely write a whole Hallmark movie about, right? Which is so awesome.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, and that's what I love about it, is that, God redeems us no matter what our story is. He can definitely take us from heartache to actually, finding that we have these moments of almost like, people like serendipity, but we know that's God incidents, right?
Right.
So that is so encouraging. And, and just for somebody who's been through that situation, who's feeling that, there's no hope, what kind of sort of tips could you give them? I mean, if we had to round it up, I know your story is awesome, and definitely if you want to learn more about Jessica's story, you have to get her book. But if you had to sort of summarize through everything you've been through, you've already given, a lot of inspirational faith tips. What kind of sort of takeaway tip would you give people?
As I was going through Jason's illness with him, a woman who had lost her husband to a brain tumor gave me a great piece of advice. And she said, in those final days, really stay in the moment. And I heeded that advice. She said she got so busy and so overwhelmed. She was so concerned about the kids and how they were doing, and just running around with laundry and errands and everything, that her husband passed away. And she was like, what? I wasn't even in the moment, and now my husband's gone. So during those final days, I just crawled into bed with Jason, and we said everything that we had to say to each other. And I felt like I had a lot of closure and being able to move on. And I think that's my biggest takeaway, is try to stay in the moment when you're going through something difficult. Just step by step. Don't try to look too far ahead, or because I think I could have gotten really wrapped up in even this woe is me pity party. I'm now a widow with 4 young children, and I had no idea what God had in store for me. Just a couple of months later, even, he flipped my page and the whole landscape changed. And I think that it's easier said than done to stay in the moments. But if you don't stay in those moments, you miss a lot of beautiful things too. And, the second takeaway I would say is not everybody's story is going to, have this beautiful ending this side of eternity. And you may not even understand why you had to go through what you went through until you leave this earth and God reveals all of that. I think a lot of people get caught up in this. Everybody needs this beauty from ashes story here on earth. And like I said, you might not even see the full extent of what God was doing behind the scenes until we are in his presence and he reveals that to us. And I guess that's where the whole faith aspect comes into play with it.
It's so true. It's like it's real life, and it's even though your story perhaps would make a really good Hallmark movie, not everybody's turns out that way, and that's okay. But that, I think, as you said, that's what faith's about, right? Is walking it out, because we have an assignment here on earth. God wants us to use our gifts and talents, and sometimes life does, throws curveballs. But I just think your story is very inspirational. That throughout it all, the major theme is that you never lost sight of God, and you never lost sight of your faith, that knowing that whatever you experience, that God would be there to redeem your story. So I'm going to say, I really appreciate you sharing all of that. And before we wrap up though, would you mind praying with our audience for those who are perhaps listening and who need a little bit of encouragement?
Sure. Ready?
Go for it.
Father, I just thank you for this day today. I thank you for the opportunity to share my story with these listeners. And I just pray that you meet each one of them wherever they are at today. Give them hope and give them perseverance to just keep going, putting one foot in front of the other. And I just pray that you provide a peace that passes understanding, and just surround them with your love. In your holy name, amen.
Amen. Well, thank you for that. Well, tell everybody what's the best place to get in touch with you? How can they connect with you online?
I am at jessplusthemess.com, and that can get kind of confusing. I don't know if we can put that in notes somewhere.
Yes, we will definitely have all the links in the show notes, but for those who are perhaps on the treadmill, in their car, who want to kind of look you up real quick, Jess, and then the number plus, right?
No, spell it out, plus,
the word.
Plus. The Mess. It's all spelled out.com. And then Facebook, Jess Plus the Mess. I'm very active, and Instagram as well, Jess Plus the Mess. And my book's on Amazon. And
we'll have those links too. And also, the other link that we'll include as well is your Lucas project, which is about you documenting with your special needs. And that's your nonprofit, correct?
That is. We started that in January to assist rural caretakers of special needs children with some respite opportunities.
That's very encouraging. And I'm sure that's greatly needed. So we'll have all these links, but as I said, you can check out Jess's information online and get her book, Sunlight After Midnight, which is Sunlight Burning at Midnight. My apologies. Right. Yeah, that's a beautiful title. That is really awesome. So I'm going to say, definitely connect with her. If you enjoyed what we had to say today, make sure to share it with your friends. If you know somebody who's been through what Jess has been through, make sure to connect them to this episode and let them listen. It's very encouraging to hear someone's story. And we would love to have your comments, like any aha moments, any sort of, things that you've learned from it. Definitely, scroll below the video and let us know. We love to connect with our audience. If you want more free resources that we only share with our newsletter community, go to mimikacooney.com and sign up today. We have great resources like ebooks, inspirational screensavers, printables, and exclusive access to our community. And if you want more freebie resources that I only share with my newsletter community, go to worthyrevolution.com and you can download that today. You can join our private Facebook group. We have a free ebook called Mindset Makeover, as well as some other goodies I love to give you, like our screensavers for your phone, which have Bible scriptures. So to encourage you, every time you look at your phone, the first thing you can lay your eyes on is God's word, which is a great way to stay encouraged through the day. So I'm going to say thanks to everyone for joining me, whether you're listening or watching online. Make sure to subscribe to our channel if you're watching on YouTube. And if you're listening on our podcast, make sure to give us a 5-star rate and review. We'd love to hear your comments. So again, thanks again, Jess, for joining us on the show today. So I'm so appreciated we made it work.
Oh, yeah, we did. That's awesome.
Take care, everyone. Until next time. Bye. Come and follow me on Facebook and Instagram, where I share lots of inspiring content.